War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. These are the words of Smedley Butler, a highly decorated United States Marine Corps Major General who earned 2 Medals of Honor during his career. So how did this American war hero become one of the most outspoken critics of the war? And who exactly was Smedley Butler? We'll explore all these questions in this video. I'm Ryan Stahlberg, a retired Marine Corps infantry officer and combat veteran with deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. I graduated from the Citadel with a degree in history, and today, I'm sharing insights into Butler's life and his influential book, War is a Racket. Let's begin with his early years of military service. Smedley Butler was born July 30th, 1881 in Westchester, Pennsylvania, to a prominent Quaker family known for pacifism, an irony given his path. His father, a lawyer and later congressman, and his mother, from a well-off family, raised him in privilege. At Haverford School, Butler's thirst for adventure led him to leave early. At 16, he lied about his age to join the Marines in 1898 during the Spanish-American War, earning a second lieutenant's commission. His 33-year career was legendary. In the Philippine-American War from 1899 to 1900, he battled insurgents, honing his combat skills. In 1900, he fought in China during the Boxer Rebellion, protecting foreign legations. The U.S. small wars known as the Banana Wars saw him in Honduras, Panama, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Veracruz in 1914, safeguarding U.S. interests. It was at Veracruz where Butler became a Marine legend, leading his men under heavy fire to secure the city and earning his first Medal of Honor for extraordinary bravery. The next year in Haiti, he cemented his legacy by orchestrating a daring assault on Fort Riviere, capturing the heavily fortified Keiko rebel stronghold with minimal casualties, securing his second Medal of Honor, a rare distinction. In World War I, he excelled leading a training camp in France. Although he didn't see combat in the Great War, he played a crucial role. After commanding Marines in China during unrest, he retired in 1931 as a Major General, one of the most decorated Marines ever. It was after his retirement that Butler's perspective began to shift dramatically. Freed from military constraints, he started reflecting on his decades of service, particularly the interventions in Latin America and Asia. He came to view these not as defenses of democracy, but as operations to safeguard corporate interests, such as those of the United Fruit Company in the Banana Wars. His Quaker upbringing likely amplified this growing disillusionment, leading him to question the moral foundations of U.S. militarism. From 1931 to 1933, Butler began speaking publicly against U.S. interventions, addressing veterans groups, civic organizations, and peace advocates. He criticized how wars enriched corporations, while ordinary soldiers and taxpayers bore the cost. A pivotal moment came in 1933 when Butler was approached by intermediaries representing wealthy businessmen, including figures tied to J.P. Morgan and other industrialists. They allegedly sought to recruit him for a plot to overthrow President Franklin Roosevelt and establish a fascist-style government, inspired by events in Europe. Butler, despite his criticisms of FDR's policies, refused and instead exposed the scheme. In 1934, he testified before the McCormick-Dickstein Committee in Congress, detailing the conspiracy known as the business plot. The committee's investigation confirmed elements of Butler's account, though no major prosecutions followed due to political sensitivities. This experience deepened Butler's conviction that corporate and financial elites manipulated national policy, including decisions about war, for their own gain. These views reached their fullest expression in 1935, with the publication of his short book, War is a Racket. Originally based on his speeches, the book is a scathing critique of war profiteering. Let's break it down by chapter to understand Butler's arguments. In the first chapter, Butler defines a racket as something that appears beneficial to the public, but is actually orchestrated by a small insider group for their profit, at the expense of the masses. He argues that war fits this description perfectly, conducted for the benefit of the few, while the many suffer. Butler draws from his own experiences, admitting he had been a, quote, high-class muscle man, end quote, for big business, Wall Street, and bankers during his career. He provides stark examples from World War I, which had ended less than 2 decades earlier. Butler claims that the war created at least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires in the United States. He also discusses how nations acquire new territories through war, which are then exploited by corporations while the public foots the bill, not just in lives lost, but in taxes that burden generations. Butler references U.S. policies like the open door policy in China, noting that the American trade with China at the time was worth about $90 million annually. In the Philippines, the U.S. had spent roughly $600 million over 25 years, while private investment there totaled less than $200 million. Yet to protect these interests, the public was stirred into anti-Japanese sentiment, potentially leading to war, a prophetic warning given Pearl Harbor 6 years later. Meanwhile, the general population paid with physical and mental scars, and escalating taxes as munitions makers, bankers, shipbuilders, and manufacturers reaped billions. Butler highlights the explosion of national debt, from about $1 billion in 1898 to $25 billion after World War I. Adjusted for inflation, that's equivalent to over $500 billion today, underscoring the long-term economic toll. In the second chapter, titled Who Makes the Profits, Butler contrasts peacetime business profits, typically 6 to 12%, with wartime windfalls of 20% to 1,800%. He cites specific companies. DuPont, the powder manufacturers, saw average annual earnings jump from $6 million pre-war to $58 million during 1914 to 1918, a 950% increase. Bethlehem Steel's profits rose from $6 million to $49 million. U.S. Steel went from $105 million to $240 million. Other industries followed suit. Copper companies averaged a 171% profit increase. Leather firms 100% to 400%. And chemical, nickel, and sugar producers saw similar surges. These figures are backed by Senate document number 259 from the 65th Congress, which detailed corporate earnings and government revenues during the war. Butler also notes absurd government purchases, like hundreds of thousands of McClellan saddles for cavalry, even though cavalry never deployed overseas during the war, illustrating wasteful spending that lined contractors' pockets. Statisticians estimated the war cost the United States $52 billion overall, with $39 billion spent during active hostilities, yielding $16 billion in profits, enough to create those 21,000 new fortunes. The third chapter, titled Who Pays the Bills, shifts focus to the public. Taxes covered much of the cost, but Butler describes manipulative tactics with Liberty bonds. Sold to citizens at $100 face value, these bonds were later depressed in price by bankers controlling the markets, forcing panicked sellers to offload them at $84 or $86. Once repurchased cheaply, bankers stimulated a boom, driving prices back to par or above for their profit. The human cost was immense, over 116,000 American deaths in World War I, plus countless maimed or psychologically scarred veterans. Also, Butler contrasts soldiers' pay across wars. In the Civil War, enlistees received bounties up to $1,200 from federal, state, and local sources. During the Spanish-American War, troops shared prize money from captured vessels. Even in the War of 1812, not mentioned in Butler's book, but relevant, soldiers were offered up to 500 acres of land as incentives. By World War I, conscription replaced these perks, fueled by propaganda shaming young men into service. Soldiers earned $30 monthly, but those with dependents had half deducted under the 1917 War Risk Insurance Act for family allotments, with the government adding matching funds. Soldiers also paid $6 monthly for what Butler called accident insurance, government-sponsored life and disability coverage, which reached 90% participation. After deductions, many had less than $9 left. Worse, soldiers were pressured into buying Liberty bonds, often leaving them with no pay at all. Butler estimates troops purchased about $2 billion worth, a figure aligned with historical trends where military personnel were key buyers in the $17 billion to $20 billion total bond sales. Families suffered too, lost loved ones, absent fathers, and the lifelong impacts of war trauma. In Chapter 4, How to Smash This Racket, Butler proposes solutions. He advocates conscripting capital, industry, and labor alongside manpower, limiting everyone, including executives, to $30 monthly, the soldier's wage. He suggests restricting the military to defensive roles, with Navy ships confined to 200 miles from the coast, allowing only those eligible for combat to vote on war declarations. The final chapter, To Hell with War, exposes hypocrisy in the U.S. entry into World War I. President Woodrow Wilson campaigned in 1916 on keeping America out, yet entered the war months after re-election. Butler attributes this to financial pressures. American banks had loaned billions to the Allies, Britain, France, Italy. If the Allies lost, those loans would default. To protect bankers' interest, Wilson mobilized the nation. Now, are Butler's claims accurate? Yes, largely. Senate document number 259 confirms the profit surges. DuPont's earnings rose 950%, Bethlehem Steel's 717%, and others similarly. The War Risk Insurance Act mandated family allotments and insurance deductions. Liberty bond sales totaled around $21.5 billion overall, with soldiers contributing significantly. And post-war market manipulations did lead to losses for small holders. As far as previous wars, Civil War bounties and Spanish-American War prize money are well-documented historical practices. However, the Civil War recruitment was more complex than Butler's account suggests. The federal government did implement a draft, and wealthy men could pay $300 or higher substitutes to avoid service, fueling resentment and even riots, while bounties led to scams like bounty jumping. Does this racket persist today? The data suggests yes. Defense contractors like RTX, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman have seen explosive growth since 2001. Fueled by post-9/11 wars and ongoing conflicts. Pentagon spending from 2001 to 2021 totaled $14 trillion, with up to half going to contractors. Industry consolidation reduced prime contractors from 51 in the early 1990s to just 5 today. Pre-2001, General Dynamics averaged about $6.5 billion annually. From 2001 to 2025, it averaged over $31 billion yearly, totaling over $777 billion. Lockheed Martin's pre-2001 average was $26.4 billion. Post-2001, it climbed to nearly $49 billion annually, totaling $1.22 trillion. Northrop Grumman went from $8.4 billion average to about $30 billion yearly post-2001. RTX Raytheon's data starts at $16.86 billion in 2001. By 2024, it reached $80 billion, with post-merger totals exceeding $852 billion through 2025. Boeing's total revenues surged from $237 billion pre-2001 to $1.78 trillion post, with its defense segment alone averaging $25 to $30 billion annually in recent years. These trillions reflect endless wars, including proxy involvements like Ukraine. As of July 13, 2025, the U.S. has dispersed about $89 billion in aid to Ukraine since 2022, with $46 billion in military assistance and $34.5 billion in economic humanitarian support. Much of this cycles back to U.S. contractors. For instance, replenishing DoD stocks has cost $8.87 billion so far, benefiting firms like Lockheed Martin and RTX. Senator Mitch McConnell noted in 2022 that such aid boosts American jobs and industries. Banks profit too. Much like in Butler's day, wartime spending increases government borrowing. U.S. debt has passed $36 trillion in 2025, partly war-related. Banks like JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup hold trillions in treasury securities, earning billions in interest. They also provide loans and underwriting to defense firms. Sanctions create trading opportunities, as Goldman Sachs did with Russian debt early in the Ukraine war. Post-conflict reconstruction loans, like the EU's $35 billion for Ukraine in 2024, further enrich banks. For a deeper dive into banking and war, I recommend The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Since Butler's era, little has changed. Arguably, it's worsened with globalized finance and perpetual conflicts. As long as war remains profitable, the U.S. will find reasons to engage. Thanks for watching. For more on American history, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm Ryan Sahlberg, and this is Manifest History.